I'm Jessica Miller, 32, and grew up wearing my brother Ryan's hand-me-downs while he got everything new. Today, after years of hard work, I own a beautiful beach house in Malibu that I purchased entirely on my own. Last weekend, during a family dinner on my oceanfront deck, my father casually announced that my beach house would make the perfect summer place for Ryan's family. The familiar sting of unfairness I thought I'd left behind came rushing back, but this time, I refused to stay silent. Before I dive into what happened next, where are you watching from today? Hit that subscribe button and drop your location in the comments below to join me on this journey of finally standing up for myself. Growing up in our middle-class neighborhood in Grand Rapids, Michigan, I learned early on where I stood in our family hierarchy. Our modest two-story home with the faded blue shutters housed 4 people, but seemed to revolve around only 3: my father William, who everyone called Bill, my mother Martha, and my brother Ryan, who was 4 years older than me. From my earliest memories, the pattern was clear. Ryan was Dad's pride and joy, his golden boy who could do no wrong. When Ryan needed new clothes for school, Dad would take him shopping for a fresh wardrobe. When my turn came, I'd get a garbage bag of Ryan's outgrown items dumped on my bed. "These are perfectly good," Dad would say, ignoring how the boys' jeans and faded t-shirts made me stick out among the other girls. "Money doesn't grow on trees, Jessica," became his favorite phrase, but somehow money did appear whenever Ryan needed anything. Birthday celebrations highlighted the disparity even more. Ryan's birthdays featured elaborate parties with all his friends, custom cakes from the expensive bakery across town, and multiple presents carefully selected by our father. For my birthdays, Mom would bake a cake and Dad would hand me a card with $20 inside, often forgetting what age I was turning. "Your brother is the future head of this family," Dad would explain when I questioned the difference. "Boys have different needs." Mom tried in her quiet ways to make things more fair. She'd slip me a few extra dollars for the mall or buy me small gifts when Dad wasn't looking. But she never directly challenged him. "Your father works so hard for this family," she'd whisper, as if that justified everything. While Dad never missed a single one of Ryan's football games, he rarely showed up for any of my events. When I joined the debate team in middle school and made it to the regional championship, Mom sat alone in the audience while Dad took Ryan fishing. When I asked him why he didn't come, he shrugged. "Those academic things are boring." Besides, the fish were biting. I developed coping mechanisms early. If I couldn't get their attention through normal means, I'd excel beyond what anyone expected. I threw myself into academics, staying up late studying by the dim light of my bedside lamp. While Ryan was praised for C's and B's, my straight A's were met with casual nods. "That's nice, Jess," Dad would say, barely looking up from the TV where Ryan's recorded football games played on repeat. One memory stands out with particular clarity. In 7th grade, I won first place in the state science competition with a project on renewable energy. The principal called our home personally to congratulate my parents. That evening, Dad spent dinner talking about how Ryan had scored a touchdown in a game they lost. When I finally interrupted to remind him about my award, he glanced at me and said, "That's good, but did you hear about Ryan's play? Even the coach said it was exceptional." I watched Ryan soak up the praise, smirking at me across the dinner table. He knew the score as well as I did. Despite everything, I found strength in my independence. While other kids relied on their parents for help with homework or projects, I learned to figure things out on my own. This self-reliance became my superpower. If no one would give me the new scientific calculator I needed for advanced math, I'd babysit on weekends until I saved enough to buy it myself. Mom occasionally tried to address the imbalance. Once I overheard her telling Dad, "Bill, you need to pay more attention to Jessica. She's accomplishing so much on her own." His response was dismissive. "Girls are naturally more independent. Ryan needs more guidance to become a man." By the time I reached high school, I had accepted that I would need to create my own path. While the unfairness burned, it also fueled a determination that would eventually take me further than anyone in my family expected. Every slight, every hand-me-down, Every missed event became another brick in the foundation of my resolve. I didn't know it then, but those early lessons in self-reliance were preparing me for a future where I wouldn't need anyone's approval or support. A future where I would build something that no one could take away from me, not even my father. High school amplified the disparities in our household. While Ryan strutted through the hallways in his name-brand clothes and varsity jacket, I pieced together outfits from his cast-offs and the few items I purchased with my own money. The other girls noticed, of course. Madison Cooper and her friends would snicker when I wore the same jeans 3 days in a row, or when they recognized one of my shirts as something that had been popular in the boys' department 4 years earlier. "Isn't that your brother's old shirt?" Madison asked loudly by the lockers one day. "Do you shop in the boys' section or just in Ryan's closet?" The laughter that followed burned in my ears for days. Ryan, now in his senior year when I was a freshman, did nothing to defend me. Instead, he sometimes joined in. "That's my old stuff," he'd tell his friends loudly as I passed. "Dad makes her wear my hand-me-downs because she's not worth spending money on." His friends would laugh, and he'd bask in their approval. When Ryan turned 16, Dad bought him a used but impressive Jeep Cherokee. "Every young man needs reliable transportation," Dad announced proudly, handing over the keys with ceremonial gravity. Ryan barely managed a thank you before taking off with his friends, the new king of the road. On my 16th birthday 2 years later, I received a bus pass and a speech about responsibility. "Your brother needed a car for sports," Dad explained when I couldn't hide my disappointment. "You just go to school and back. The bus is perfectly adequate." What stung even more was discovering the vast difference in our college funds. While helping Mom organize some paperwork, I found statements showing that Ryan's college fund contained nearly $40,000, while mine held barely $8,000. When I confronted Dad about it, his explanation cut deep. "Ryan is going to be the man of the family someday, Jessica. He needs a proper education to support his future family. You'll probably just get married anyway." He said this so matter-of-factly, as if the unfairness was simply the natural order of things. That night, I made a decision that would shape my future. If my parents wouldn't invest in me, I would invest in myself. I got a job at the local grocery store, working after school and on weekends. Every paycheck went into a separate account that only I knew about. I called it my freedom fund. My junior year, when Ryan had already dropped out of community college after a single semester, wasting a chunk of that generous college fund. I was taking AP classes and studying for the SAT in the grocery store break room. My manager, Ms. Diane Lawson, noticed my dedication. "You're different from other kids your age," she said one evening. "Most teenagers spend their money as fast as they earn it." I explained my situation, and she nodded thoughtfully. "My father was the same way with my brother," she shared. "Today, I own this store, and my brother still lives in our parents' basement." She became my first mentor, teaching me about business operations and even giving me additional responsibilities that came with small raises. My senior year brought the college application process. While my friends had parents who hired counselors and helped with essays, I navigated the complex system alone. I stayed at school late to use the computer lab, researching scholarships and financial aid options. The guidance counselor, Mr. Taylor, took notice and offered to help after seeing me there night after night. "Your academic record is outstanding," he said, reviewing my transcript. "With these grades and extracurriculars, you should aim for scholarships." I applied to 15 schools and 37 scholarships, writing essays late into the night after finishing my homework and work shifts. When the acceptance letters came, I had options my parents never expected. Full academic scholarships to 3 state universities and partial scholarships to 2 private colleges. Dad seemed almost annoyed by my success. "College isn't for everyone," he said dismissively. Ryan tried it and found it wasn't his path. Ryan's path involved moving back home, sleeping until noon, and cycling through minimum wage jobs that never lasted more than a few months. Yet Dad continued to support him, paying his phone bill, covering his car insurance, and giving him spending money, all while telling me I needed to learn financial independence. The contrast couldn't have been clearer. Ryan had been given every advantage and squandered it all. I had been given nothing but obstacles and was flourishing despite them. The realization crystallized my determination. I would build my own success without their help or approval. Each dismissive comment, each unfair comparison became fuel for my ambition. The night before leaving for college, I sat on my bed surrounded by the few possessions I would take with me. Mom came in and sat beside me, her eyes wet with unshed tears. "I'm proud of you," she whispered, pressing a small envelope into my hand. Inside was $500 in cash, more money than she'd ever given me at once. "I've been saving this for you. Don't tell your father." I hugged her, understanding the complicated love of a woman who knew things were wrong but lacked the courage to change them. "Thanks, Mom. You're going to do great things," she said. Things none of us expected. She was right, though neither of us knew just how right she would prove to be. State University welcomed me with its sprawling campus and anonymous freedom. For the first time, no one knew me as Ryan's little sister or Bill Miller's daughter. I was just Jessica, a freshman with a full academic scholarship and a determination that burned brighter than the pilot light in my dingy dorm building. While other freshmen called home regularly for money or advice, I stretched my modest savings with careful planning. My roommate, Allison Park, watched in amazement as I created elaborate spreadsheets tracking every dollar. "You're like a 40-year-old accountant trapped in a teenager's body," she joked, as I calculated the exact number of ramen packets needed to reach my next paycheck from my campus library job. I double majored in business administration and finance, carrying a course load that made my academic advisor raise his eyebrows. "This is quite ambitious," Professor Harris commented during our first meeting. "Most students take 4 or 5 courses per semester, not 7. "I can't afford to waste time," I explained. "Every semester costs money, even with scholarships." While I maintained a 3.9 GPA, worked 20 hours weekly at the library, and took summer classes to graduate early, Ryan's college experience took a different trajectory. After dropping out of community college, he had tried a technical program for automotive repair, quitting 3 months in when he didn't connect with the instructor's teaching style. During my rare calls home, Mom would share these updates in her careful way. "Ryan's just finding himself," she'd say. "Your father's helping him explore options." Exploring options meant living rent-free at home while Dad financed a series of get-rich-quick schemes. First came Ryan's custom car accessory business that consisted of a half-built website and parts scattered across the garage. Then a sports memorabilia investment opportunity that somehow required a $5,000 loan from Dad. Each venture fizzled within months, with nothing to show but credit card debt that mysteriously got paid off. Meanwhile, I lived on campus year-round, finding summer jobs and internships rather than returning home. During my sophomore year, I secured a coveted internship with Palmer Financial Group. The position paid modestly, but offered something more valuable: mentorship from Heather Palmer herself, the firm's founder. "You remind me of myself at your age," she told me after I'd stayed late to complete a research project most interns would have left unfinished. "Hungry, smart, and unwilling to wait for opportunities to be handed to you." Under Heather's guidance, I learned about investment strategies that went far beyond what my classes taught. She showed me how to identify undervalued assets, the importance of diversification, and most crucially, how to think long-term. "Most people your age can't see past the weekend," she observed. "You're already thinking about retirement. That's your advantage." I graduated a semester early with honors, 2 majors, and a job offer from Palmer Financial already in hand. The entry-level position as a financial analyst wasn't glamorous, but it offered solid benefits and growth potential. More importantly, it allowed me to start executing the plan I'd been developing since those painful teenage years: financial independence that no one could undermine. My first apartment was a tiny studio I shared with a nursing student named Taylor. We barely saw each other due to our opposite schedules, which suited me fine. Every dollar that didn't go to basic expenses went into my investment accounts. When colleagues splurged on happy hours or weekend trips, I stayed behind, working extra hours and building my knowledge base. 6 months into my job, I received my first promotion. The salary increase went entirely into my growing investment fund, while I maintained the same frugal lifestyle. My coworkers thought I was simply boring. They didn't understand I was playing a completely different game. Back in Michigan, Ryan had moved through 3 more jobs and was now working part-time at my father's friend's hardware store, a position that somehow allowed for a surprising amount of sick days and long lunches. Dad had recently helped him lease a new truck, explaining to my mother that Ryan needs reliable transportation for work, apparently forgetting that Ryan's workplace was exactly 1.3 miles from their house. The contrast between our lives grew starker with each passing month. While I was saving 50% of my income and researching real estate markets, Ryan was still asking Dad for gas money and temporary loans that never got repaid. When I mentioned my first investment property plans during a rare visit home, Dad scoffed. "Real estate is risky," he warned. "You should stick to your stable job and leave investing to professionals." The next day, I overheard him on the phone, co-signing for Ryan's new credit card. "Everyone needs help building credit," he explained when he saw me listening. The irony that I had built my excellent credit score entirely on my own wasn't lost on me. My first property purchase came 2 years into my career, a small, outdated condo in a transitioning neighborhood. The modest down payment represented every extra dollar I'd saved since college. The property needed work, peeling linoleum, ancient appliances, and carpet that had seen at least 2 decades of wear. But the bones were good, and the location had potential. Every weekend for 6 months, I renovated that condo myself, learning from YouTube videos and the occasional help from Taylor's boyfriend, who worked in construction. I painted cabinets, installed new flooring, and replaced fixtures, transforming the dated space into something modern and appealing. When I finally rented it out, the monthly income covered the mortgage with $300 to spare. Money that went straight into the fund for my next property. I had taken the first concrete step toward building wealth that couldn't be dismissed or taken away. That Christmas, when I drove home in my still modest, but reliable used Toyota, purchased with cash, Ryan pulled up in his leased luxury truck. Dad beamed with pride at his son's apparent success, never questioning how a part-time hardware store employee afforded such a vehicle. "Ryan's got a good eye for quality," Dad commented, admiring the truck's leather interior. I bit my tongue, knowing that pointing out the difference between owning assets and financing liabilities would fall on deaf ears. Instead, I shared a knowing look with Mom, who had recently begun asking quiet questions about my financial strategies during our private phone calls. The emotional distance between my family and me continued to grow, but with it came a liberating clarity. I was building something they couldn't understand because they'd never looked beyond the surface appearances of success. What looked like deprivation to them, my modest car, my shared apartment, my lack of designer clothes, was actually the foundation of true financial freedom. By my 27th birthday, I owned 3 cash-flowing properties and had been promoted twice. The little girl in hand-me-downs was steadily becoming a woman whose net worth outpaced most people a decade her senior. And I was just getting started. My career trajectory accelerated in ways that surprised even me. By 30, I had climbed from financial analyst to senior consultant at Palmer Financial, managing investment portfolios for high-net-worth clients. My reputation for meticulous research and strategic thinking earned me the nickname, the Oracle, among colleagues. "Jessica doesn't just see where the market is," my boss explained to a new team member. "She sees where it's going to be in 5 years." This same forward-thinking approach guided my personal investment strategy. While continuing to live well below my means, I systematically built my real estate portfolio. My weekday routine became predictable: work, research, sleep. Weekends were for property hunting, renovations, and tenant management. My 4th property purchase, a duplex in an up-and-coming neighborhood, marked a turning point. For the first time, I hired contractors instead of doing all the work myself, learning to leverage other people's time while I focused on finding the next opportunity. The property cash flowed immediately, with both units rented to young professionals at rates that exceeded my projections. Meanwhile, Ryan's pattern of failed ventures continued. After the hardware store job ended, he was let go for chronic tardiness, though Dad told relatives he left to pursue better opportunities. Ryan decided to open a sports bar with a high school friend. Dad contributed a significant investment to help secure the lease and renovate the space. 6 months later, during one of my quarterly visits home, Mom pulled me aside in the kitchen. "Your father took out a second mortgage to help Ryan with the bar," she whispered, worry lines deepening around her eyes. "It's not doing well. They've had to let all the staff go except the bartender." I felt a familiar twist of frustration. "How much did he give Ryan?" "60,000, she admitted, looking down at her hands. "And now Ryan needs more." The bar closed 3 months later, leaving Ryan with debt and Dad with mortgage payments he hadn't planned for. What happened next still stuns me when I think about it. During Sunday dinner, Dad turned to me and asked, "Jessica, do you think you could help your brother out? Just until he gets back on his feet." The irony was breathtaking. After years of favoritism and minimal support for my endeavors, they were now asking me to bail out the golden child. I took a measured breath before responding. "I'm not giving Ryan money," I said calmly. "But I'll sit down with him and help create a financial plan if he's serious about turning things around." Dad looked offended, as if my refusal to simply hand over cash was a personal affront. Ryan, who had been staring at his phone throughout dinner, didn't even look up. "Your brother would do it for you," Dad said. "Would he?" I asked, meeting his gaze steadily. "Has he ever?" The conversation ended there, but it marked another milestone in my emotional separation from my family's dysfunctional dynamics. I would help them in productive ways, but I wouldn't enable the cycles that had been running for decades. My professional reputation continued to grow. I was featured in a regional business magazine's 30 Under 30 list, which led to speaking engagements at investment seminars and financial literacy workshops. At one such event, I met Gregory Davidson, founder of Horizon Investments, who approached me after my presentation on long-term wealth building. "Your approach is refreshing," he said, handing me his card. "Too many young advisors are chasing quick returns without understanding the fundamentals." 3 weeks later, I was having lunch with him, discussing a position at Horizon that would allow me to work with higher-profile clients and develop my own investment products. The salary increase was substantial, but the real value lay in the equity options and the platform to build my personal brand in the financial world. I accepted the offer and within a year, launched a specialized division focused on sustainable wealth creation for first-generation professionals. People like me who didn't have family money or connections to rely on. The division exceeded its 5-year growth projections in just 18 months. My real estate holdings grew alongside my career. Property 5 was a small apartment building with 8 units. Property 6 was a commercial space in a revitalized downtown area. By 31, my portfolio generated enough passive income to cover all my living expenses, not that anyone would guess it from my still modest lifestyle. Dad called that year, his voice strained. "Your mother and I are having some financial difficulties," he began. "The second mortgage for Ryan's bar, well, we're behind on payments." I closed my eyes, already knowing what was coming. "I wouldn't ask if it wasn't important," he continued. "But we might lose the house." After a long pause, I agreed to help not with a gift, but with a formal loan that included a payment schedule and interest rate. Dad seemed surprised by the paperwork I sent over, as if he'd expected me to simply transfer funds with no questions asked. "This seems unnecessary between family," he complained. "This is precisely how it needs to be with family," I countered. "Clear terms prevent misunderstandings." He signed reluctantly, and I transferred enough money to bring their mortgage current. The monthly payments to me started promptly but stopped after 3 months. When I inquired, Mom explained apologetically that they'd needed to help Ryan with some unexpected expenses related to his new business idea, a food truck concept that, like all his previous ventures, existed primarily in conversation rather than reality. I never received another payment, nor did I expect to. The experience simply confirmed what I already knew. In my family's eyes, Ryan's needs would always come before my boundaries. That December, scrolling through real estate listings as I did each evening, I saw it, a property that made me stop mid-scroll. A beach house in Malibu with large windows overlooking the Pacific, contemporary architecture blending seamlessly with the natural landscape, and a wraparound deck perfect for watching sunsets. The price was significant, but not out of reach given my accumulated wealth. For the first time in my methodical investment journey, I made a decision based on something other than pure financial calculations. This property wouldn't necessarily be my highest-yielding investment. It might not appreciate faster than other options. But looking at those photos, I saw something I'd never had, a place that was wholly mine, chosen for my pleasure rather than its return on investment. 2 months later, after a careful inspection and skillful negotiation, I signed the closing documents on my beach house. Standing alone on the deck that evening, watching waves crash against the shore, I felt a profound sense of arrival. The girl in hand-me-downs now owned a piece of paradise, earned through her own efforts and protected by her own boundaries. I decided then that this house would be different from my other properties. This one wouldn't be rented out or flipped for profit. This one was for me, a tangible symbol of how far I'd come and how completely I'd rewritten the story others had tried to author for me. What I didn't anticipate was how quickly that symbol would be challenged by the very people who should have been proudest of my achievement. The Malibu beach house stood as my greatest personal achievement, 3 bedrooms of contemporary elegance perched on a cliff overlooking the Pacific Ocean. Floor-to-ceiling windows captured panoramic views of waves crashing against the shoreline. The open-concept living area flowed onto a wraparound deck where the boundary between house and horizon seemed to dissolve. Unlike my investment properties, which I selected based on cash flow potential and appreciation forecasts, this purchase was personal. Every element, from the minimalist kitchen with its waterfall island to the primary suite with its ocean-facing soaking tub, represented choices made solely for my enjoyment. The property cost $3.2 million, a sum I could afford without compromising my investment strategy or retirement plans. After years of disciplined saving and strategic investing, I had built enough wealth to indulge in this one magnificent splurge while maintaining my financial security. The beach house wasn't just a luxury residence, it was tangible proof that I had succeeded despite, not because of, my family's support. For 3 months, I kept the purchase to myself, savoring private weekends watching dolphins play in the distance or falling asleep to the rhythm of the waves. Eventually, though, a sense of accomplishment, perhaps mixed with a lingering desire for parental approval, led me to invite my family for a weekend visit. A beach house in Malibu? Mom repeated when I called with the invitation, her voice a mixture of surprise and pride. Jessica, that's wonderful. Dad's reaction was more measured. Sounds expensive, he commented in the background. Hope you're not overextending yourself. Ryan's response came via text, beach house equals party time. Bringing some friends. I quickly clarified that this was a family-only visit, which led to a sulky reply about me being still no fun after all these years. Their arrival on Friday evening established the dynamic that would define the weekend. Dad entered first, scanning the open living area with what seemed like a property inspector's eye rather than a father's pride. Pretty modern, he commented, in the same tone he might use for slightly disappointing. Not much privacy with all these windows. Mom moved through the space with genuine appreciation, running her hand along the kitchen countertops and exclaiming over the ocean view. It's absolutely beautiful, Jessica. I can't believe this is yours. Ryan immediately headed for the wine fridge, helping himself to an expensive bottle I'd been saving for a special occasion. So this is how the other half lives, he remarked, splashing wine into a glass. At 36, he still carried himself with the entitled air of someone waiting for life to recognize his exceptional qualities and reward them accordingly. That first evening remained superficially pleasant. We ate dinner on the deck as sunset painted the sky in spectacular oranges and pinks. Mom asked thoughtful questions about my career and seemed genuinely interested in my answers. Dad mostly listened, occasionally interjecting comments about the property's maintenance challenges or the likely high utility bills. Ryan dominated much of the conversation with stories about his latest business concept, an app for sports fans that he insisted would revolutionize the game day experience. The fact that he had no programming knowledge, no business plan, and no investors didn't temper his enthusiasm. "I just need some seed money to get it off the ground," he explained, looking meaningfully at me. "Maybe 30,000 to start. Obviously, I'd make you a partner." I deflected gracefully, suggesting he develop a business plan first, which he dismissed as unnecessary paperwork that stifles creativity. The next morning, I took them on a walk along the beach, pointing out the neighbors' homes and sharing my plans for landscaping the property's small but dramatic clifftop garden. Dad's comments continued in their subtly dismissive vein. "Pretty impractical location," he noted as we navigated some rocks. "Maintenance must be a nightmare with all this salt air." "I've factored maintenance into my budget," I replied evenly. "The property manager handles most issues." "Property manager?" Ryan snorted. "La dita. Must be nice to pay people to solve your problems." Mom shot him a reproachful look. "Your sister worked very hard for this." "Sure," Ryan agreed with a shrug. The family workaholic. Some of us value experiences over possessions. The irony of this statement, coming from someone who had spent his adult life accumulating debt to finance the appearance of success, wasn't lost on me, but I held my tongue. That evening, I prepared a special dinner to celebrate our family time together. As we gathered around the dining table, with the sunset once again providing a spectacular backdrop, I felt a momentary sense of contentment. Perhaps this weekend could begin healing some of our family's fractured dynamics. Then Ryan cleared his throat. "So I've been thinking about my situation," he began, swirling wine in his glass. "Diana and the kids really need a break from the Michigan winters. We've been stuck in that small house for years." Diana was Ryan's wife of 5 years, a kind woman who worked full-time as a dental hygienist while also shouldering most of the parenting responsibilities for their 2 children. "A vacation would do them good," I agreed, not yet seeing where this was heading. Dad set down his fork. "That's actually something we wanted to discuss with you, Jessica." The tone shift was immediate and palpable. Mom suddenly became very interested in her plate, while Ryan developed an expression of practiced neutrality. "This place," Dad continued, gesturing around the dining room, "is obviously more than one person needs. Especially someone who works as much as you do." A cold feeling settled in my stomach as I began to understand the direction of the conversation. "Ryan's family could really use this place in the summers," Dad said, his tone suggesting he was proposing a perfectly reasonable arrangement. "Diana could bring the kids here while school's out. Give them some California sunshine." Ryan nodded enthusiastically. "The kids would love it. And it's not like you're here all the time." I set my wine glass down carefully, taking a moment to process what was happening. After years of favoring Ryan, after minimal support for my education and career, after never once offering significant help with my endeavors, my father was now suggesting I should share my hard-earned beach house with my brother's family. "This house is mine," I said finally, my voice calm but firm. "I bought it with money I earned and saved. It's not a family timeshare." Dad's expression hardened. "Family helps family, Jessica. Your brother has children. What do you need all this space for?" "I need it because I worked for it," I replied. "And I want it because I earned it." "Always so selfish," Ryan muttered, loud enough for everyone to hear. "Some things never change." "Selfish," I repeated, my carefully maintained composure beginning to crack. "I'm selfish for not wanting to give away my property to someone who's never worked for anything in his life?" "That's enough," Dad snapped. "Your brother has a family to support. Then maybe he should support them instead of looking for handouts," I shot back. The tension that had been building for decades finally erupted into a full-blown argument. Years of resentment and unequal treatment spilled out across my carefully set dinner table. Mom tried ineffectually to calm things down while Dad defended his suggestion as just trying to help the family. "This house would make a perfect summer home for Ryan's family," Dad insisted again, as if repetition would somehow make the idea less absurd. "You're just one person. Therefore." In that moment, Looking at my father's entitled expression and Ryan's expectant one, something inside me finally broke free. The little girl who had accepted hand-me-downs and second-best treatment was gone. In her place stood a woman who knew her worth and was done apologizing for her success. "I think it's time for you all to leave," I said quietly. Dad looked stunned. "You're kicking us out? Over this?" "Yes," I replied, surprising myself with how steady my voice remained. "This isn't just about the house. This is about 32 years of being treated as less important, less deserving, and less valuable than Ryan. And it stops now." As my family gathered their belongings in shocked silence, I stood on my deck watching the waves crash against the shore, feeling a strange mixture of grief and liberation. The family weekend I had hoped would bring validation had instead brought clarity. I would never receive the recognition I craved from my father, and continuing to seek it would only perpetuate my pain. As they drove away, the beach house felt emptier than before, but also somehow more completely mine. The space that had been momentarily invaded by old dynamics was mine to reclaim, just as my life had been. The days following my family's departure passed in a blur of conflicting emotions. I returned to work on Monday, compartmentalizing as I always had, but the echoes of that disastrous dinner followed me. During a crucial client meeting, I found myself momentarily lost in thought, replaying my father's words. This would make a perfect summer home for Ryan's family. Heather Palmer, now a close friend and mentor, noticed my distraction and pulled me aside afterward. "You're somewhere else today," she observed. "Everything okay?" In the privacy of her office, the professional facade I'd maintained cracked. I found myself sharing the whole story, not just the beach house incident, but the lifetime of favoritism that preceded it. "I finally stood up for myself," I concluded, "but now I'm wondering if I overreacted. They're still my family." Heather's response was measured but firm. "Jessica, would you advise a client to give away a multi-million-dollar asset because a relative felt entitled to it?" Put that way, the answer was obvious. "Of course not. Then why would you consider it acceptable for yourself?" She leaned forward. "The hardest boundaries to set are with the people who never respected them in the first place." Her words stayed with me as the inevitable aftermath unfolded. Mom called first, her voicemail a mixture of apology and gentle guilt. "We're all still in shock about how things ended," she said. "Your father didn't mean to upset you. He just thinks about Ryan's children." I didn't return the call immediately, needing time to formulate a response that wouldn't revert to my lifelong pattern of accommodation. Ryan's approach was less subtle. His text message read simply, "Way to blow everything out of proportion. Dad's devastated. Hope you're happy in your empty mansion." Dad's email arrived 3 days later, its subject line "Family Matters," conveying the self-righteousness contained within. He expressed disappointment in my selfish reaction and suggested I needed to reflect on the importance of family support. The final paragraph was particularly telling. "When I think of all we sacrificed to give you opportunities, this rejection feels especially hurtful." The historical revision was breathtaking. What opportunities had they sacrificed for? What support had they provided that wasn't simultaneously or previously given to Ryan in greater measure? After a week of distance and reflection, I called my mother when I knew Dad would be at his bowling league. "I need to say some things that are long overdue," I began when she answered. "And I need you to just listen." For the next 40 minutes, I calmly detailed the pattern of favoritism that had defined my childhood and continued into adulthood. I described specific incidents, birthdays where Ryan received expensive gifts while I got token presents, college funds with vastly different amounts, my achievements that went unacknowledged while Ryan's mediocrity was celebrated. "I don't need Dad to apologize for the past," I concluded. "But I do need him to respect my boundaries now. My home is not available for Ryan's use. My money is not available to bail out his failed ventures. And my success is not something to be dismissed or exploited." Mom was quiet for a long moment. "I always tried to make things more fair," she finally said, her voice small. "I know you did," I acknowledged. "But trying in small ways while allowing the larger pattern to continue wasn't enough. Your father comes from a different generation," she offered weakly. "Boys were just valued differently. Mom, I interrupted gently. It's 2025, not 1955. And even if that explained his behavior, it doesn't excuse it. Another silence stretched between us. Then, to my surprise, Mom said something I'd never heard from her before. You're right, she admitted. We didn't treat you fairly. I should have said something long ago. The validation I'd sought for decades arrived in those simple words. It didn't erase the pain of the past, but it created a small opening for a more honest relationship moving forward. Dad was less receptive when I finally spoke with him 2 days later. I had carefully prepared what I wanted to say, determined to remain calm and clear regardless of his reaction. I'm not angry about the beach house suggestion, I explained, though this wasn't entirely true. I'm setting a boundary after a lifetime of unequal treatment. That's ridiculous, he scoffed. We gave you and your brother the same opportunities. Dad, my college fund was 1/5 the size of Ryan's. Your brother had different needs. My achievements were ignored while Ryan was praised for minimal effort. That's not true. You're asking me to give Ryan access to my beach house when he's never succeeded at anything without your help. Family helps family, he insisted, his voice rising. Ryan has children. Yes, he does, I agreed. And as their father, it's his responsibility to provide for them, not mine. The conversation devolved from there, with Dad eventually hanging up after declaring that I'd changed and become cold and calculating. The irony that these traits, determination, logical thinking, financial acumen, had built my success was apparently lost on him. Ryan's response came in the form of a late-night phone call, his words slightly slurred. You think you're so much better than everyone, he said without preamble. With your fancy job and your beach house. I don't think I'm better than anyone, I replied evenly. I just worked for what I have. Some of us didn't get all the advantages you did, he continued, the victim narrative so ingrained he actually believed it. The absurdity of this statement might have made me laugh if it weren't so painful. What advantages, Ryan? Please enlighten me. You were always the smart one, he said, as if intelligence were a gift I'd stolen from him rather than something I'd cultivated through endless hours of study. Everything came easy to you. Nothing came easy, I corrected him. I worked for everything while watching you receive constant support and encouragement for minimal effort. That's not how it was, he insisted, though with less conviction. It's exactly how it was, I said softly. And continuing to pretend otherwise doesn't help either of us. The weeks following these confrontations were difficult, but clarifying. I began working with Dr. Samantha Chin, a therapist specializing in family dynamics, to process the complex emotions surrounding my family relationships. What you're describing is a common pattern in families with golden child/scapegoat dynamics, she explained during our second session. The favoritism isn't just harmful to the scapegoated child. It damages the golden child too, creating dependency and entitlement issues. This perspective helped me view Ryan with more compassion, if not more willingness to enable his continued dependence. He had been shaped by the same dysfunctional system I had, just from a more privileged position within it. Meanwhile, I continued building my chosen family of supportive friends and colleagues. Heather and her husband invited me for weekend dinners. My neighbor at the beach house, Natalie Wilson, a successful surgeon with her own complicated family history, became a close friend and confidant. These relationships, based on mutual respect and genuine care, showed me what healthy connections could feel like. 3 months after the beach house confrontation, Dad called with what he clearly considered an olive branch. Your mother and I have been talking, he began awkwardly. Maybe I was a bit harsh about the beach house situation. Coming from him, this qualified as a significant concession. I waited, curious where this was heading. Family is important, he continued. More important than material things. I hope you can find it in your heart to forgive any misunderstandings. It wasn't exactly an apology, but it was more self-reflection than I'd ever heard from him. Progress, however minimal. I appreciate that, Dad, I said sincerely. I'd like us to have a relationship, but it needs to be one based on mutual respect. Of course, he agreed quickly. So, will you be coming home for Thanksgiving? Your brother and his family will be there. Some things changed, some remained the same. but I was different. The beach house incident had crystallized something important. I could love my family without sacrificing my boundaries. I could seek reconciliation without enabling unhealthy patterns. And most importantly, I could define success on my own terms, regardless of their recognition or approval. I'll think about Thanksgiving, I told him. But I want to be clear, my boundaries around my home and my finances remain firm. There was a pause, then a resigned sigh. You always were stubborn, he said, but without the usual edge of criticism. I prefer to call it determined, I replied. And for the first time in our complicated relationship, I thought I heard a note of grudging respect in his answering chuckle. The journey toward emotional healing began with an uncomfortable acknowledgement. The family dynamics I'd endured weren't just unfair, they were harmful. Dr. Chin helped me recognize that my years of seeking approval and validation from people unwilling or unable to provide it had created patterns of overachievement mixed with persistent self-doubt. Your success is remarkable, she observed during one session, but you've built it while carrying the weight of believing you needed to prove your worth. Isn't that what drove me to succeed? I asked, genuinely uncertain if I could separate my achievements from the pain that had fueled them. You succeeded despite that belief, not because of it, she corrected gently. Imagine what you might accomplish if you weren't constantly trying to prove your value to people who should have recognized it from the beginning. This perspective shift, from seeing my drive as compensation for childhood neglect to recognizing it as an intrinsic strength, marked the beginning of true healing. I started acknowledging my accomplishments without qualifying them, accepting compliments without deflection, and most importantly, recognizing that my worth had never been dependent on my father's approval. Therapy also helped me understand my mother's complicated role in our family system. As Dr. Chin explained, in families with clear favoritism, the non-favoring parent often becomes an enabler, not actively participating in the favoritism, but allowing it to continue. This insight allowed me to build a more authentic relationship with Mom. During our weekly phone calls, she began sharing her own struggles within the marriage, confessing that she'd always felt powerless to challenge Dad's decisions. I should have stood up for you more, she admitted during one particularly emotional conversation. I was afraid of causing conflict, but my silence hurt you. I'm so sorry, Jessica. Her apology, unlike Dad's half-hearted attempt at reconciliation, acknowledged specific harm and took responsibility for it. This opened the door to genuine forgiveness and a new chapter in our relationship, one where she began asking about my work with genuine interest and sharing her own thoughts more honestly. With Ryan, the path forward proved more complicated. His identity had been built around being the favored child, the one who deserved special treatment simply for existing. My refusal to participate in this dynamic threatened his self-concept in fundamental ways. 6 months after the beach house incident, Ryan lost his latest job, a sales position at a local gym that had lasted barely 3 months. For the first time, Dad didn't immediately step in with financial support. Mom later confided that their own finances had finally reached a breaking point after years of subsidizing Ryan's lifestyle. Your father's retirement fund is nearly depleted, she admitted worriedly. We can't keep supporting Ryan and still hope to maintain our own home. This crisis point created an unexpected opportunity. When Ryan reluctantly called to ask if I could loan him money to cover his mortgage payment, I offered something different. I won't give you money, I said firmly, but I will help you create a sustainable financial plan if you're serious about making changes. After initial resistance and a predictable accusation that I was showing off my financial expertise, desperation finally led him to accept. The following weekend, I flew to Michigan and spent 2 days at his kitchen table, creating a realistic budget, analyzing his resume, and developing a debt repayment strategy. Diana, Ryan's wife, joined us for these sessions, her relief palpable as someone finally addressed the financial chaos that had defined their marriage. I've been trying to get him to create a budget for years, she confessed when Ryan stepped outside. But he always said budgets were for people who couldn't afford to live well. Budgets are actually for people who want to afford to live well, I corrected, giving her a knowing smile. They're about priorities and choices, not restrictions. By Sunday evening, Ryan had a clear plan for financial recovery, including specific job search targets that matched his actual skills rather than his inflated self-assessment. More importantly, he had something he'd never received from our father: honest feedback about his financial choices and their consequences. "This is hard," he admitted as I prepared to leave. "I've never really looked at the numbers before. Dad always just fix things." "I know," I said. "But fixing things temporarily isn't helping you build anything lasting." He nodded slowly. "I resented you for so long," he said, surprising me with his candor. "Everything seemed so easy for you." "It wasn't easy, Ryan. I just didn't have the option of giving up." This exchange marked the beginning of a fragile new understanding between us. Ryan's journey toward financial responsibility had many setbacks. Old habits don't disappear overnight. But each time he faced a challenge, he now had tools to address it rather than looking for a bailout. Dad observed these changes with mixed emotions. On one hand, he seemed relieved that Ryan was finally taking responsibility for his own life. On the other, it represented a shift in family dynamics that diminished his role as the perpetual problem solver and provider. During a visit home that winter, I found Dad alone in the garage, organizing his tools with unusual meticulousness. "Ryan seems to be doing better," he commented, not looking up from his work. "He is," I agreed. "He's making good choices." Dad nodded, arranging screwdrivers by size. "Your approach seems to be working better than mine did." Coming from him, this was tantamount to a full confession of failure. I recognized the difficulty of this admission and chose my response carefully. "Different approaches work at different times," I offered. "Ryan needed support when he was younger, and you provided that. Now he needs accountability, and I'm trying to provide that." Dad finally looked up, his expression softening slightly. "You've done well for yourself, Jessica. That beach house, it's something to be proud of." The compliment, so long awaited and so simply delivered, caught me off guard. "Thank you, Dad." "I still think you work too much," he added, unable to resist qualifying his praise. But his tone held more concern than criticism. "I'm finding more balance these days," I told him, which was true. The beach house had become my sanctuary, a place where I regularly disconnected from work to simply exist in the moment, watching waves and rebuilding my relationship with myself. This conversation didn't magically resolve decades of complicated family dynamics, but it represented a significant shift. One where my father began to see me as a successful adult rather than a child who had failed to meet his expectations. As my relationship with my birth family slowly evolved, my chosen family continued to grow. Weekend gatherings at the beach house became a regular tradition, filled with friends who celebrated my successes without envy and supported me through challenges without judgment. During one such gathering, as we watched the sunset from my deck, Heather raised her glass in an impromptu toast. "To Jessica," she said, "who built this beautiful life brick by brick, and who teaches all of us that the most important approval comes from within." The words touched something deep inside me. For so long, I had measured my worth against my father's impossible standards or in comparison to the preferential treatment Ryan received. Now, at 32, I was finally learning to evaluate myself by my own metrics: integrity, perseverance, generosity, and the courage to set boundaries. The beach house that had once been a flashpoint of family conflict had transformed into something more meaningful, a symbol of my journey towards self-worth and authentic connection. Each room held memories of healing conversations, supportive friendships, and quiet moments of self-discovery. 1 year after the confrontation that had changed everything, I invited my family to the beach house again, this time with clearer boundaries and expectations. Mom came eagerly, Dad cautiously, and Ryan and Diana with their children, all of them noticeably more respectful of my space and property. As we gathered on the deck for dinner, my 5-year-old niece Lily tugged at my hand. "Aunt Jessica," she whispered, "I want a house like this when I grow up." I knelt to meet her eyes. "You can have whatever you work for, Lily. And I'll help you learn how to make that happen." Across the table, I caught Ryan watching this exchange, a complicated expression on his face. Later, as we cleared dishes together, another new development in our evolving relationship, he said quietly, "I want them to have better examples than I did. To know that success comes from work, not expectation." "They already have a better example," I assured him. "They have a father who's learning and growing right in front of them." That night, after everyone had gone to bed, I stood alone on the deck, listening to the rhythm of the waves. The journey from the little girl in hand-me-downs to the woman who owned this view had been longer and more difficult than it should have been. But standing there, I felt a profound sense of peace with the path I'd traveled. The beach house was mine, earned through years of discipline and determination. But more importantly, I finally belonged to myself, no longer seeking validation from those unable to provide it. I had built this life brick by brick, and I deserved every magnificent part of it. As I watched the moonlight dance across the water, I realized that true healing isn't about erasing the past or even fully reconciling with those who hurt us. It's about reclaiming our stories and writing new chapters on our own terms. My new chapter was just beginning, and for the first time in my life, I was the sole author. What about you? Have you ever had to stand up for yourself against family expectations or favoritism? How did you handle it? Share your experiences in the comments below, and don't forget to like and subscribe for more stories about finding your worth and standing your ground. Remember, your value isn't determined by anyone else's perception. It's inherent in who you are and what you choose to create. Thank you for joining me on this journey, and I wish you courage in writing your own story, whatever chapter you may be facing right now.